Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie and TV discussion in the multiverse. I'm your host, Adam Fortress, and I'm joined by a man who always wears his underpants on the outside, Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
Thank you for having me.
And he has the intelligence, the spirit, and the vision to transcend the mundane, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and they're real, and they're spectacular.
Indeed. Strap on your ill-fitting suits and crank up the Counting Crows because we are traveling back to 1993 as we talk the feature-length pilot for Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman, or as I like to call it, Lactonos. Lactnaos. That's Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman in an acronym. Because
also sounds like a villain from season 3.
It could be. It could be. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we do, we want to say a big, giant thank you to everyone who helped support this show over at patreon.com/HMP. There you get the pre-show, the post-show, of course, the Dinger Zone. This week, we talk a little bit about The Mandalorian and a little She-Hulk casting news, all kinds of fun stuff. Classic Dinger Zone action, so check that out. And we're also you also get to vote every single month on what we talk about. This month, we've got some very interesting choices. I worked with all of our patrons, or at least the ones that hung out in our big hangout last night. We hung out for like 2 hours, probably about 8 to 10 of us, just kind of talking about this, that, and the other. It's a great fun time, and if you'd like to do that and all those other fun things, head on over to patreon.com/HMP. Join up today. We really appreciate it. You know what's kind of cool, though? It was, of all the Patreon supporters and stuff, it was pretty much all the top dogs.
Say what?
It was all the top dogs, the people that support at the highest level. Yeah, all our executive producer level people, they all show up.
High rollers.
It's just like politics. You're paying for access.
Yeah, you're paying for the access to the HMP. So hit that up on Patreon. We'll be doing one of those every month. And it's also very helpful because when it comes down to the voting and stuff, I just go, what do you guys want to see? And they help fill in the gaps and stuff. And we've got some interesting choices. We'll cover those at the end of the show. Patreon.com/HMP.
Did anyone ask for surrogates?
No, we've already done surrogates, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. I was about to say, I know we've done like almost 330 shows. But
Adam, now I'm not talking about necessarily the executive producers, but you know as well as I do that half the time when someone sends like a Facebook note or an email requesting that we cover a movie, it's one we've already covered.
Oh, there's so much of that. I mean, you know, you've got a wealth of stuff to go back and check out. So before you ask a question, just take a look. Just go to heromoviepodcast.com. That's actually the best way to do it, and that's how I end up going through and go, have we covered X? And just type into the little search bar there, and it'll show up or not show up, and then you know that you haven't done that. And there's a couple that I was surprised about where it was just like, I feel like we've covered that. You look it up, and sure as shooting, we haven't. So it's a good tool that's always there. HeroMoviePodcast.com, and all the links are there too. You can link to the shop. You can buy stuff and all this other. It's good stuff. Patreon.com/HMP. Okay. Superman has something to do with comics. I don't know.
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Bruce, I have an idea of where you might be going with this. I want to see if my thoughts are correct. What do you got?
Oh, man, you need to privately text Sean so he can verify if you know where I'm going. Because this may be different. This is a property based on the oldest mainstream comic book that there is. So there's so much to choose from. Like I could give you yet another glimpse into Superman and his creators. I could talk about Lois Lane for a second time. We could talk about Jimmy Olsen, Ma and Pa Kent, or even Perry White. But I'm going to choose the character that brings the most mustard to this hot dog of a program. And that is none other than one Cat Grant. Is that what you had?
No. I thought
the odds paid really well on that one.
Yeah, I would have cleaned up.
Now, Cat's character is probably best known for Callista Flockhart's portrayal on the CBS show Supergirl. And how many people do you think have already forgotten that season 1 of Supergirl was on CBS? I don't know what happened over there. They made a big deal about it, and it was their highest rated show among viewers under 72 years old. But I guess Les Moonves just didn't like it, so it went over to the channel that hasn't met a soapy superhero serial it doesn't love. That, of course, is the CW. Now, Cat Grant featured heavily in that first season, but in season 2, she fell victim to Canada because the C in CW stands for Vancouver, the town in which all CW shows must be filmed. Callista didn't want to spend that much time away from the man who's crashed more planes than many folks have ever seen. so she made a courtesy appearance or two before bowing out. But Tracy Scoggins, she's an actress who probably never got the whip straight from Indy himself, so she would travel anywhere in the world to play the role of Cat Grant for as long and as enthusiastically as the ratings would allow. But where did this feline-named enchantress come from? Well, Cat Grant first showed up in the pages of Superman number 424 in 1987. She was created by all-time legends Jerry Ordway and Marv Wolfman, and her first storyline revealed that she had been driven to drinking by her ex-husband, Joe Morgan. Now, don't get too excited, kids. I'm not certain that her ex-husband was the perennial all-star second baseman who played for the Houston Colt 45s up until he was traded to Cincinnati for outfielder Jimmy Stewart. But there's an outside chance that maybe he was her ex.
Oh, Mary, I got a baseball.
Now, Kat got a job at the Daily Planet as a gossip columnist, but she always felt like she needed to prove to Lois and Clark that she was a real reporter. Also, Kat is part of a wonderful love triangle in which she is attracted to Clark, but Clark loves Lois. Lois loves Superman. I'm not sure if she knows that he's also Clark at this point in time. Jimmy loves Kat, but nobody loves Jimmy because, well, he's Jimmy Olsen. Have you seen the guy? He's not Cat Grant material, and she's probably got 15 years on the young guy. But eventually, Kat does make a romantic connection with the masked vigilante called Gangbuster. And I don't know much about that character, but I imagine he's into some pretty kinky stuff, which just might be right up Kat's alley. Did you guys catch that play on words? Cat's alley, alley cat.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
Okay.
I got it. I just didn't care.
Coming to the wise decision that print media was dying, the ever clever Kat moved into the world of broadcast journalism when she moved to WGBS. I like to imagine that is the amalgam comic superstation that combined WGN with WTBS. And she started hosting a talk show called, appropriately, The Cat Grant Show. Kat's talk show found a modest but respectable audience, but it just needed something special to give it that extra push that could put it over the top. That opportunity came when she landed the talk show guest who could make or break her career. She landed an interview with the big blue Boy Scout himself, Superman. I would imagine Kat was tingling with anticipation as the interview was set to begin, but unfortunately for the world, her show, Superman, and some would even say comic book readers, disaster struck in the form of Doomsday, whose rampage interfered with Kat's big show. Despite the career setback, Kat did eventually get promoted to WGBS station manager, but the world, being the cesspool of suck that it is, rumors, as well as in-story insinuations, suggested that Kat had slept her way to the top, specifically by succumbing to the advances of a really old dude who was the father of the station's owner, Morgan Edge. It was kind of a gross thing to suggest, Cat Grant being intimate with a man who was nearly 80. Could you guys imagine Callista Flockhart in a relationship with some very much older guy just because he was rich and famous, maybe even crashed an airplane or two?
Hey, don't badmouth that relationship. That gives me hope.
I'll say this though, like in Hollywood standards, like that thing has stood the test of Hollywood time.
Consider
20
years now, right?
When you say it gives you hope, it's like, he can't live forever, and then I get my chance with Ms. Flockhart.
Yikes.
Well, thankfully, these rumors did not happen to be true. Kat put the kibosh on these office whispers when she filed a sexual harassment suit against Vinny Edge, and he was forced to step down from the WGBS board of directors. Hashtag Me Too, hashtag Time's Up, hashtag Magneto was right, hashtag I added that last one. Now, later on, when Lex Luthor is president, he appoints Cat Grant as his press secretary. And, well, just marinate on that for a moment. Lex Luthor was president, and Cat Grant, the lady with the second most aggressive cleavage in DC Comics at the time, she was White House press secretary. And both of them were actually ridiculously competent and qualified by modern standards. But despite their best efforts, Lex was impeached and removed from office, and Cat went back to celebrity gossip, working for a paper called the Los Angeles Tatler. Being a child when I was, having the limited TV options I had, I always kind of thought of Perry White as Lou Grant and Lois Lane as Mary Tyler Moore. But I didn't assign anyone to the Cat Grant role. I mean, Cat Grant can't be Rhoda. That would be kind of weird. But you know what would be weird? A modern equivalent for a modern era. So I think if I had to pick, I'd say Cat Grant is the Maria Menounos of the DC universe.
Oh, perfect fit.
So she's terrible.
She's no Natalie Morales, but she tries.
Oh, shots fired. That's worse than anything I've ever said about Maria Menounos. I'll tell you that right now. That was hardcore.
Well, he's taking a shot at me.
But now this, like I said, this came out in 1993. I was a cool 11 years old when this thing was out, and for me, it was like, hey, we've got a comic book live action thing on television, and this was an event. Like we said, this is an hour and a half of featured length pilot of a TV show, which we don't see enough of these days, I don't think.
And this episode was nominated for an Emmy. Outstanding direction.
Well, I guess the bar was not very high in 1993.
Yeah, I mean, what are they up against, Alf?
Yeah, there were 3 channels, 5 nights. I mean, there had to be some competition. But yeah, it did lose to Alf. I'm looking here.
Oh well, there you go. Listen, Alf was a fine program.
Now,
So let's get general first. Had you guys ever seen any of this? I'm guessing that you had, Adam.
Yeah, I feel like when it came out, I watched at least the first season of the show.
Wow.
And as it goes on, because, again, you're a stupid 11-year-old kid. I got nowhere to go. I got nothing to do. It's a Friday night or whenever the hell this thing came on. And it was a comic. We don't have the embarrassment of riches that we do today. So it was like, hey, I get to see Superman on screen. And when he was fighting villains and stuff, it was fun for what it was. But it quickly, the whole entire show turns eventually to such a drama. Or again, these are all from my recollections, turns into this big drama of it is Lois and Clark before it is Superman by every measure.
But I mean, it's shot like a soap opera. I mean, the whole thing is a soap opera. It would make sense.
When speaking of shot, I called this movie or this show the Backlight Central because every character in this is backlit so hard.
Yeah.
And, some of the cast comes from soap operas. Like Tracy Scoggins comes from Dynasty and a Dynasty spinoff. They got a couple of other folks. When I looked for their credits, it was mostly like daytime soap operas. The guy that played Lex Luthor lived in New York, so I imagine it was a combination of theater and soap operas that keep you living in New York as an actor. But I don't think I'd ever seen an episode of this before. I mean, I've seen clips here and there, like on YouTube or something, or maybe clips here and there. Mm-hmm. Strange thing is, a guy who was one of my best friends in junior high and high school was not a comic book guy at all. Didn't really care much for superheroes. I know when he was younger, he kind of liked Boba Fett. That was as close as he got. But in college, I didn't watch this at all. He did not go to college. He stayed at home, never really left the hometown that we grew up in, still lives there. But man, in 1993, he was all about some Lois and Clark, and I couldn't quite get it. Later, I think it was just he really was into Terry Hatcher.
I was about to say, it's got to be a Terry Hatcher thing, right?
But it was just the strangest thing in the world that all of a sudden he couldn't do something on a certain night when I was home for summer because he had to watch a rerun of Lois and Clark or something like that.
Yeah, when, 93, that's when this came out?
Correct.
Yeah, 93.
This is still during the time where if you were a nerd, at least as far as my life went, you had to keep that hidden.
Well, yes,
it's before everyone is sort of a nerd. It's during that time.
It was pre-normalization, but also it's a point in our lives, where we're in our very early 20s at that point. No, we're not. We're like pre-20s at that point. We're trying to be grown-ups, and it's kind of like the thing. Cartoons, I don't know if it still holds up now because people kind of all ages watch cartoons of different kinds. But when I say cartoons, I'm thinking like Smurfs and G.I. Joe and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And like you love them till you get to a certain age where you kind of have to show, well, I'm grown up, so I don't watch them. Then you get old enough where it's okay to go back and watch them. And it's like, yeah, it's nostalgic or whatever. Well, that same kind of thing used to happen with comic books and superheroes too, where you had to like them when you were young. You kind of had to have this period where you either hid that you didn't like it or you tried other stuff. And then when you were older and more confident, you went back to what was comfortable. Right. So I think for us, it was not only the time, the pre-normalization that we have now, but it was also like just the age we were when it came out. Because you make either one of us 10 years older or younger, we might be watching this show.
Well, I did watch it. I didn't watch it often. I did watch it from time to time just because, as we said at the beginning, there wasn't a whole lot of superhero stuff to watch. And so it was this, and like the Superman animated show was on at the time too, like towards like the middle of the run of this show. And so, like I would catch it from time to time. I wouldn't, it wasn't appointment viewing, because this show just wasn't, it didn't put my butt in the seat, but it also, it's one of those weird things like, What Women Want, where it's made for women, but they're trying to catch a couple of dudes too along the way.
Yeah.
And this is one of those shows.
And for me, you it's a little short-sighted just to judge something based on the title alone. But at the time, we also didn't have a whole lot of forums, didn't have a podcast. You couldn't just stream something when you had a few minutes to kill to check it out. You had to make an appointment to watch a show, basically. Yeah. So like this and Smallville fell into the same category where I thought, well, if they're too embarrassed to put Superman in the title and they're trying to trick some normies into watching the first few episodes, then I'm not going to watch it. Like if you can't call it Lois and Superman, you don't say a Superman show. I mean, they did put the tagline, The New Adventures of Superman, but back in those days, you didn't get the full title. It's not like on Netflix where you pop it up. You're getting Lois and Clark in your TV guide. That's how they listed it. Right. And, Smallville, the same thing. I'm like, why don't they call this Superboy? Why are they calling it Smallville? And Smallville, of course, famously never shows the costume on him. At least here, they don't make that mistake. But this is coming like 93 is right after the Superboy show that was on in syndication had just finished its run. So I was like, man, why don't they just call this Superman or Lois and Superman or something? So
because it wasn't for us.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't for us, but it also wasn't necessarily for the people they thought it was for. I think they probably found kind of an accidental audience, and then accidentally lost them because they didn't know who they found.
So do we want to get into specifics?
We can't. Well, I do want to go ahead.
I was just going to comment a little bit more about the premise of the show. John Byrne, famously the writer of Death of Superman, the comic book that absolutely paid for nobody's college education.
Darn it.
But John Byrne had taken a sort of a novel approach. Well, it was novel at the time. The approach was Clark Kent is the central character and Superman is a mask that he wears. He tried to make Superman, more like other superheroes instead of, now before John Byrne and currently, which is, of course, after John Byrne's run, Kal-El is the central character and Kal-El is closer to Superman. Clark Kent is the mask he wears. But John Byrne wanted to take this where no Clark Kent, he made it more like a Spider-Man type thing where Peter Parker, we're following Peter Parker's soap opera and the Spider-Man stuff just throws monkey wrenches in what's going on. He tried to take that approach and it worked for a lot of people. I mean, it definitely sold well, but just a different take from what we would see now from a Superman show.
And one of the things that I was kind of amazed at and something that I certainly didn't remember, not specifically really in this episode, but man, go through the cast list for this show. It is a character actor smorgasbord. It is fantastic. I mean, there's so many just amazing character actors and even just regular people that aren't normally actors all throughout this series. It's insane.
It was a primetime network show that needed a lot of characters for one episode. It's like the Law and Order phenomenon. Everybody's been in it because they need everybody.
Yeah, there's a ton of Jim Dandies in there for sure.
So many. Yeah. I'm like, you can just go, like, I wanted to make a list of some of the more prominent ones, but I just kept scrolling and we'll be here for 10 minutes listing off all of these people. It's unbelievable. So go to IMDb, just start scrolling through there and you're like, I know that guy, I know that lady, I know that guy. It's unreal.
And kind of back what I was talking about with John Byrne too, they tried to communicate that visually. Did you guys notice Clark Kent's hair?
I noticed the mullet in the beginning. That's what I really enjoyed. I love the flow at the back.
Superman famously has the cowlick that hangs down on his forehead, and when he's Clark Kent, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what they really tried to do, at least in this pilot, was put the cowlick down when he's Clark Kent, and then the hair's all slicked back when he's Superman, kind of reversing the hair cues to say when he's being himself, when he's being natural, that's when he's Clark Kent.
I will say this. They do, in subsequent episodes, just at least outside of this, I remember his hair at least getting decent looking. You know, that it eventually worked. But in this first episode, it looks like he just came out of the hockey rink, took a shower, and decided to be Superman.
It is inspired by John Byrne, man. That's the super mullet era.
Yeah. There was a lot of that going on. Juergens had a bit of the kind of flowy, mullety sort of deal going on as well.
And hey, maybe by 93 it was gone, but you said this in 1992. Old Bruce has a mullet to die for.
To die for. Well, Sean, you've got some great notes here. Let's get in because there's so much to talk about with this crazy 90-minute pilot.
I do. So, when we first start the show, the first character we really see is Lois, dressed as a man.
Badly.
And my first thought is, are there 3 men in the world who would mistake Terry Hatcher for a man? I don't care how much prosthetics you put on. That lady is a lady.
She's got just such soft features and everything to where when you look at her with that, you're like, what's going on here? This is, huh? It's so strange. And they make it a point of like, oh, your disguise was so good that it fooled everybody. Except 2 seconds into it, we like, oh, that's Lois wearing a man suit. What's going on?
Yeah, it fooled me.
Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain are just so perfectly 90s hot.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one is more 90s hot than these two people. And when you see it, like, oh, that's what that's supposed to look like. When you see, like Clark wearing flannel, or Terry Hatcher with her crimped hair. Sometimes, there's like a lot going on.
I'll say I'm very pro crimped hair Terry Hatcher. I like that better than straight hair Terry Hatcher.
So
in
much,
this episode, at least.
Man, she's so beautifully 90s hot.
And we already talked about my friend who we decided watch this show because Terry Hatcher was hot. But man, do they hide her behind a lot of layers of clothing in most scenes? Like man, very overdressed.
I guess the 90s. Yeah. Everybody's got giant shoulder pads still. That's hung over from the 80s. It still isn't gone.
I mean, Clark's wearing like super baggy pants.
Oh, like the jacket on him is like 2 times too big for him. It's so bad.
Yeah, you kind of only had two options then. You had like the shoulder pads, the the underskirt with the very thick, heavy overskirt, or you had like the Warrant cherry pie video. Like there wasn't much in between in the 90s. It was all or nothing when it came to wardrobe.
It's true. And one thing I noticed right off the bat with this show is that it's between basically The Crow and this for the 2 most 90s things to exist.
I think this probably edges it out just a bit because it's still, there's enough, well, I don't know, because like I said, I think there's still some like 80s remnants that are still kind of around in the early 90s that, just even now go like, oh, wow, 93, we were still wearing that, right?
I would say like The Crow is either the 90s you think you lived in or the 90s some people aspired to live in. And when you saw people that had that Crow influence, you noticed it. But this is more like the 90s you really lived in, where especially the early 90s, where people hadn't quite given up on the 80s yet. They hadn't quite embraced anything. This is kind of like that weird, kind of boring mishmash that actually occupied most of the spaces we occupied.
Yeah, I could say, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It was the 90s outside of Seattle, New York, LA, a few places.
And to get back to it here. So the opening scene where you're outside the Daily Planet is actually shot on a real street. That's not a back lot. But when you get into the episode more, that is clearly a back lot, what the Daily Planet is. So they did a really good job of melding the two, I would say, especially for the time where, it took me a minute to go, oh, now they're on a back lot. Whereas because the opening scene, that is an actual honest to God street.
And everything is filmed so bright.
Street, I mean, Metropolis, a very New York city, fictional city, but was that street in LA? Because everything I ran across seemed to suggest this filmed in LA.
Yeah, it's a shot. It's shot in LA.
That makes sense.
And then you see Perry White who right off the bat, just one of the best lines in the entire series, I'm sure, which is he yells out to everyone, "This is a newspaper, not happy hour at Buckingham Palace." Just the dumbest dialogue ever.
Can I just go ahead and point out that I think this might be my favorite Perry White?
Oh, really?
I will say this.
I really like Lane Smith here. This guy, I wish I'd watched the show just because I could have been for years saying he was my Perry White.
If you would have asked me before this, he would have been the one that I put in there, because Perry White, for the most part, has been kind of a crap character in live action stuff. It's never really been done super well. And he was kind of the guy, because I don't know why. I just kind of, maybe it was I had more material for Perry White with this show than anything else, and so I guess that's where I got the sense of the character. But rewatching it now, I go like, ooh, I don't know about all that. Maybe I'm gonna have to switch to Lawrence Fishburne, because at least he looks like he's a professional. He's a professional who goes to work every day at least.
Very true. Yeah. But I love Jackie, man. Jackie from the old Superman movies with Christopher Reeve.
He always looks like he's gonna die at any possible second.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Jackie, but I like Lane Smith, and maybe I like it because he's new and old at the same time.
Yeah,
like I'd never seen this performance before, but it's an old school kind of hammy thing that nothing new is going to have, and he just kind of like I'd never realized it before. But if I closed my eyes and thought, what should Perry White look like? It's a lot like Lane Smith.
Right.
He's just a little too Southern fried for me.
That's true. Yeah. If there's any complaint, I think that's probably one of the better ones levied.
So, do you guys know what happened with Jimmy Olsen on this show?
No, I know there's two actors, because when I'm looking in IMDb for some of all the characters and stuff, I'm like, oh, there's two Jimmy Olsens. Wonder what happened.
Well, I
there.
know this definitely could not have been the better of the two.
You're wrong, actually. This one is the better one of the two.
Because this is, as much as Lane Smith is my Perry White, this is my anti-Jimmy. Like, of all the Jimmys out there, this is the least on my list of Jimmys.
He's probably the best looking Jimmy we've had, maybe.
Well, that's the problem. That's why they got rid of him at the end of season 1. Because Michael Landis plays Jimmy Olsen for all 21 episodes of the first season here. And that is so incredible to say. There's 21 episodes of the show.
Yeah. Listen, there's 80.
That's so crazy.
There's 80 something in the entire run. That's even more crazy.
But he looks too much like another character that they're about to start up big time on the show. And so, and at least that was the reason they gave.
Oh.
And so they replace him with another guy. And I can remember watching the show when it first aired and thinking to myself, like, man, I hate Jimmy Olsen on this show, but this is not the same guy. Cause I looked it up and I went, that's not the same guy I remember.
I'd kind of like to be in the meeting where Justin Whalen, the second Jimmy Olsen, comes in to read, and they're like, you're perfect. The other guy, he was too good looking, not you.
You got the kind of face that doesn't make people just go like, oh, I really like that guy. They tolerate your looks, and we like that about you.
But for Jimmy Olsen, this is a case where the original, Salkin brothers, whatever they are, the Salkins Superman just cast that role so perfectly.
Yeah.
That like anything that's not at least trying to imitate that is hard to swallow.
Agreed.
He's got to kind of be nerdy and dorky and just, a certain
Especially
level.
They made the decision to de-dorkify Clark. They took all the wonderful clumsiness out of Clark that made that character so good in the Christopher Reeves movies. So when they take that dorkiness out of Clark, you got to put a little more dorkiness into Jimmy or something.
But you're right.
You know what I'd really like to see? I would love to see a new Superman movie at some point here, where the Clark Kent character basically behaves like Jackie Chan does in his movies, where he keeps falling over and like knocking things over, but it's helping everyone what he's doing.
That actually would be a nice touch. And man, I'm surprised that they didn't do that maybe in Donner's first Superman, because he was really leaning into like the act like you're sneezing to blow out a fire and stuff
they
like that.
They do that a bit.
But they didn't full on go into like, oh, he trips and falls and other people can't see the benefit of that fall, but us, the viewer, can.
No, they put him into a category where he is almost like he's super in every way. Like he knows different languages. He's world
Yeah.
like he knows poetry and kierkegaard and all this kind of crap that you're just like, why?
They're almost making Superman a step down from Clark Kent.
Yeah, because you get to Superman, he's just a simplified guy who just saves people and fights things, I guess.
Who wears a very weird suit.
Yeah, I don't want to stray too far from your notes, Sean. So what's your next topic there?
So the first time we see Clark, this is I'm going to keep saying this because there is so much to pick on this show. But the first time we see Clark, there's a bus careening out of control and walking through the crosswalk. There is, because I actually paused it. There are 2 nuns.
Yes.
A baby in a stroller.
This is
an elderly African-American woman and a new mom in the bus path.
It's
the only
great.
thing that's missing is a fruit cart and 2 guys carrying a big window.
Yep.
It is so ridiculous. It's hilarious. I literally paused it because oh, no, not 1 nun. Let's give them 2. So ridiculous.
We had them both try out for the nun role, and God, they both gave such great performances that we had to put them both in. I said, screw it. Get another nun suit. Get another nun habit. Put them in it. Get them on the street.
And so then the plot kind of starts up after that because, Superman stops the bus, the perfect handprint in the bus.
So terrible. That's great. And I love the lady's reaction when she sees it. If she would have had a drink, she'd have poured it out.
Yes, exactly.
Throw the drink
no
away.
Superman 1. Say, Jack, that's a bad outfit, but it is pretty close.
Close enough.
It is pretty close. So then Clark makes his way upstairs, and this is kind of where the plot starts for this, where weird scientist guy hands Lois a perfectly wrapped brown package and yet still took the time to wrap the package in twine, like all scientists do.
Yeah. And to me, the package looked surprisingly like if she had unwrapped it and it was a sub sandwich, I think I would have been surprised.
Oh.
Guy who's out of his mind, he's lost his family, he perfectly wraps it in brown paper and then it's like, you know what, that's not enough. I'm gonna wrap this up in twine.
You know what?
And
people overlook presentation so many times. The food can taste great, but if it doesn't look really good, you're missing out on half of the experience.
And I feel like the initial notes that were sent to wardrobe were that this is a crazy guy on the corner, crazy homeless guy on the corner who just happens to be right. So they made the wardrobe, then they changed it to world-class scientist, but he kept the wardrobe.
He doesn't really give off the air of I'm a genius.
He doesn't even give off the air of I'm an eccentric who doesn't take time to worry if my clothes match. I mean, he really looks like he's been wearing these clothes out of doors for about a week or a month or something.
I was just amazed that he could get all the way into the newsroom. Like the cop basically just goes, I don't know what to tell you. He just came in.
Oh, look, we'll get into the security here in a little bit on their show. There's a lot of problematic security happening on their show. But and one of the biggest problems with this show is that it's the TVs are turned immediately to the exact moment to give the right exposition.
Yeah.
That is awful on this show because it happens a few times.
This show is not a lone offender in that. I mean, that was something that kept things propped up for a long time.
Right. But so this is like in the heyday of it.
Turn it to the plot channel, please. Thank you.
Oh, another thing I wanted to point out is that when Clark is walking up to the Daily Planet, man, Metropolis loves its horse-drawn carriages because there are 2 horse-drawn carriages as he's walking up to the Daily Planet in mid-morning. It's mid-morning. When everybody goes for horse-drawn carriage rides.
and you know how most productions have somebody that kind of keeps an eye on the budget? I don't think they had one here. It's like, well, we double ordered them. We'll just use them both.
You can definitely,
it's already happened.
You can definitely tell with this pilot, they spent some $1993. They really did. There was a lot of money spent on this pilot. but they didn't spend a lot of it on music because in the first half of this episode, it always sounds like Desperados trying to start up. It just has those few little notes there, and you're like, but nope, we're going on, moving on.
And I don't know, was 93 early enough where people just couldn't agree on music, so you have to use bland stuff? Or is it a situation where maybe if we'd watched it live, the entire soundtrack was like Smashing Pumpkins, but they didn't have the rights?
No.
We see this.
This was from the composer for the show. I mean, his name is listed in the credits there and everything as the show's opening up, and it's like, oh, they actually got somebody to. They did not do a good job with this.
Do you think like they at least, just for the heck of it, gave John Williams and Danny Elfman a call?
Man, that's a tough one because I don't think that they did, and the reason why is because it's so specifically this is a different kind of Superman that I don't know if they would have made that phone call, because it really is trying to go sort of like split the baby, this show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hey, you split a baby, it only lasts for 3 seasons before it goes bad.
That's how this show did.
So what do you guys think of Eddie Jones, the guy who plays Pa Kent on the show?
I thought it was an odd choice. In fact, man, now that you talk about the Southern fried drawl that Perry White has, I think maybe Lane Smith would have been a better Pa Kent.
I agree.
Yeah,
or
I
maybe
agree
he
with
could have
that.
played double roles and act like the audience doesn't catch on.
He just
until
puts
later
on a
when he reveals.
mustache as Perry.
He's like, Clark, I have something to confess. He pulls it off. I'm your father. And that would have been a great season 3 cliffhanger to end on.
It certainly would have been different.
And it's weird because Eddie Jones is somebody I think of, like, there's always menace to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he 95% of the time was, character actor, like evil middle management was kind of his jam.
Yeah, you don't really picture him in a Pepperidge Farm commercial like they try to do here.
No, because there is a bit of menace to him. And so to have him be Pa Kent, it was kind of neat to see, this is what this guy's version of Pa Kent would be. Like, that part is neat. But I can't imagine watching 3 seasons of this show like, you know what? That's Pa Kent. Like, that would never happen. I would never think of that guy as that guy, you know?
This is something, and this show has a thing where I found it interesting because I guess I'd never really thought about it too much because Superman can move as fast as he can. He goes back to Smallville all the time, going back to Kansas, just like real quick sojourn back right. Hey, let me go check on mom and dad. Hey, how's it going? I have dinner. Go back to Metropolis.
Takeout from Shanghai though too, so they're just showing he moves at the speed of
which
instant.
brings me a question. I got a major question. Is that an abuse of superpowers?
It's certainly I don't know. Like, you would have to justify it. You're in Metropolis. One would think you've got tons of great options for food available to you. That also said, the thing that bothered me almost more than him actually flying to China to get Chinese food was the fact that he is brand new to town. And he just goes, no, don't worry. I know where to go. It's like, you've just been here. How do you know any of the good restaurants in town?
And this is where I want to point out 2 important things about this specific thing. Number 1, Superman, is he cool about the fact that he's not paying tariffs when he brings that back?
Oh, good
like
point.
He's still in poor, hardworking American jobs in Chinese restaurant. Like, it's sort of an un-Superman thing to do. And number 2, would anyone in 1993 eat authentic Chinese food from Shanghai without being prepped for what it was and not be horrified?
That's another thing that I was thinking about. It's because what we think of as Chinese food here in America is not Chinese food in China. It's a very different thing. We've Americanized
if I
stuff.
learned anything from Iron Man 3, it's that fortune cookies are an American invention.
There is a great documentary about fortune cookies. I can't remember the name of it, but check it out. It's actually pretty good.
I like the idea. There's this restaurant in Shanghai that's importing fortune cookies from America just so Superman can pick them up and bring them back.
I also, she goes, oh, well, this is in Chinese. And of course he knows how to read. It's so, we've made him such a Superman, even outside of being Superman, that it's
we've
sad.
made him a Mary Sue at that point. He's
for
immediately
sure, man.
excellent
When that
at
old
everything.
lady starts reciting Chekhov in the abandoned theater,
Yeah.
my first question was, how does a guy who grew up a farmer in Kansas, who spent the majority of his time playing football, how does he know what Chekhov is? You know, I had spent time in theater my entire life. I didn't know what she was reciting there.
Was it from the split cherry tree?
It was from the white cherry
something.
Okay, because if you're going to say he's smart by knowing Chekhov, but then you go with the split cherry tree, which is like the only Chekhov regular people know, then that kind of undercuts it. But also, it's probably the only thing the writer knew.
Tie the yellow ribbon around the old oak. Oh wait, no, that was Tony Orlando and Dawn.
And if we're nitpicking at the Clark stuff here, which I mean, we can go on all day. We really can.
There's some to pick.
There's a prop that he has that makes me insane when I saw it on screen, which is that he's got his like satchel briefcase thing with his initials on it.
Uh-huh.
If he is so new to the business, why does that look like that thing has been used consistently for 30 years?
Yeah, he looks like he picked up, what's his name? Uncle Ben's briefcase.
Yes.
Well, but we did see that he types so fast his typewriter smokes, so maybe he opens and closes that case really fast and it gets aged rapidly.
Oh, let's half a second.
Sure.
Because you mentioned that special effect and stuff. The effects where he's just walking on the wall, some of the corny and floating to change like whatever it was, it's so corny and bad. It's like, were people impressed?
I'm wondering if they were using the same stage effect of Lionel Richie's dancing on the ceiling.
Oh my God, that's a great
and
music
when you
video.
say same, I think you're thinking like me, like they had it on hand, so decided to use
That's
it.
what I mean. Like it's
like not the same
thing.
effect, but the exact same machinery.
We just
Because
gotta
that's
redress
a
it.
really, it's a really kind of involved thing to do to build a rotating room for what comes across as pretty. It doesn't look that great on screen, even by 93 standards.
No, you can look at a decade earlier, and they do a better job of all that stuff in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and that movie had like no money.
Yeah.
They
And
just
I
strapped
guess
a guy
now's
to this a chick to the ceiling and drug her around. It was insane.
And now's as good a time as any, I think, for me to just say, I think young Dean Cain is a pretty terrible actor.
Oh, he's awful, but he had no training. He had nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a football player. I think he was 2 years removed from football. He had done a short stint on 90210, and then because of his role in that, he got this job.
Now, Sean, did you read the backstory on casting Superman? Dean Cain was not the original actor cast.
I did not. I don't know that.
Now, the syndicated show Superboy, which is actually a fun show. I like that show. I mean, it's campy and it's cheap, but it wasn't a network production or anything, and it can be kind of fun. But it had two Superboys. There was the original Superboy, then he was recast for a much longer time with the second actor. That second actor got cast as Superman for this show, but apparently the person who cast him had I don't know how you cast without seeing a resume. I don't understand how this happens. But then when higher ups found out what you cast somebody who just finished a Superboy show to be Superman now, no, we can't have that. I don't know.
I think that's great casting. They totally should have done that.
Yeah, first of all, he can probably act better than Dean Cain. Young Dean Cain, at least, maybe even present day Dean Cain. I don't know, because he never really worked much after this, which I think goes back.
Oh,
to
that
saying
is untrue.
No, he's worked plenty. It's just in things
you'll
you'll never see or never watch. But
we'll get into that at the end of the show.
He's been in enough.
Direct to Redbox stuff. Okay.
It's not even that good. It's on Hallmark Channel.
And I guess they cast him because of the way he looks.
He's a good-looking guy. He's like super 90s
he is
looking.
a good-looking man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's, yes, sure, he's a good looking man, but there also were other good looking men who could deliver a line.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to give the best performance of.
I'll say this:
this guy seems really uncomfortable delivering his lines.
This may just be, false memory speaking here, but I feel like he got better than what he was in this pilot. I feel like that. But then again, if you get enough reps in, you're going to be at least, better than awful.
Yeah.
You guys, I need a minute.
Okay. But I loved all the. Okay, let's talk about Lex Luthor here for a second.
Okay,
Bruce.
yeah, because I'm just being a big old Mr. Negativo on a lot of these. I didn't like Lex Luthor's casting much. Tell me how you felt about it.
He's okay. He's fine. One of the things that I really enjoyed though is that for the first 10 to 15 minutes that from the inception that we meet Lex Luthor's character, whenever his name is said, it's like Frau Brücke, the lightning just goes off every time. You know how Lex is here. Yeah. A big lightning thunder strike happens to where whoever was gaffing this show had a great time because they're just flashing lights and doing all kinds of crazy, stupid stuff.
So John Shea, the guy that plays Lex Luthor, he had just finished, I don't know if it was on Broadway or not, but on the New York stage, he had just finished Yentl. He had just been in the stage production of Yentl.
Huh.
And this was his next job. And they can't now I understand you can't get Gene Hackman to shave his head. You roll with it because it's Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like this guy ought to be willing to shave his head to be Lex Luthor.
Well,
I still have a hang up with a hairy Lex Luthor.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But at the same time, I think it's Gene Hackman kind of ruined it in a weird little way. It's like, look, man, Hackman didn't shave his head, so I don't have to shave my head. And he's almost doing a half Hackman. A little bit of Hackman in there in this performance, it feels.
Is there a reveal at some point during the show that he is actually bald?
I don't think so, man.
I
think he was just on this first season. I don't know if you heard when I told Adam he had just finished up performing in Yentl on the New York stage. This was his next job. He was only in it for one season because he was a New York-based actor. This filmed in L.A., and he said it was too grueling. The travel, the commute from New York to LA to film the show. But I kind of think if you just wrapped up Yentl and now you're a regular on a primetime network show, isn't that worth maybe moving to LA for a little while?
I don't think it had anything to do with the travel. I think it had to do with the show.
Like the way they made it sound is, oh man, I got to get up at 3 this morning to catch my plane so I can be there at 10 to do my scenes and then fly home.
Well, they said
the new version of that is the oh my God, I have such back problems. I'm gonna have to get surgery on my back, and then those back problems mysteriously disappear when you go to a different show.
So, what do you think was the problem with John Shea? Do you think that he just didn't enjoy it? I mean,
I think he didn't want to be on the show. I think that he was probably sold a bill of goods of what his role would be on the show. And then, a year into it, he's like, well, this is not at all what they said this role would be. And so he was like, you know what? I'll come in and I'll do guest spots every so often.
Something that I didn't realize or know for that matter is he actually tried out for Indiana Jones. He screen tested. Oh, wow,
really?
Screen tested it against Karen Allen. Unfortunately not. Or fortunately, depending upon it's fortunate for us that he didn't, but unfortunate for him, I suppose. But I don't think anybody outside of Harrison Ford, that movie would have been, anywhere near as good as it was with Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford just made that role so good.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about Harrison Ford during that time is that Harrison Ford's an actor, but he's not a capital A actor.
Yeah.
I think that Shea is a capital A actor, and you can feel it coming off of him when you're watching performances. He speaks very succinctly.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like a regular on a network show in 1993 is a pretty rare gig for an actor. I'm just kind of surprised he didn't want to roll with it a little bit longer, and those sweet residuals when this bad boy went into syndication.
Well, I think that there is that rare breed of person where it really doesn't have anything to do with the money. And he might be one of those guys. I mean, he came from theater. He could be one of them.
It's the theater people and stuff like that are like, hey, I just go off like this funds my all my other more creative endeavors kind of people.
I can see that.
So did you guys talk about the Lane sisters yet?
No.
Let's talk about the Lane sisters, because until she called her Lucy, and I know that Lucy Lane is her sister, I don't know. Did they make it like, let's say you're someone who doesn't know who Lucy Lane is, and you just hear Lois talking to Lewis. Do they to Lucy? Do they mention sister in this show?
No.
Yes.
Well, did they? Because I didn't pick it up.
They do. Where but it's from Lucy. It's not Lois. Lucy says something like, dear sister, it has nothing to do with blah, blah, blah. I mean, she does mention the fact that.
Well, it was also the 90s, so I guess I figured it was just like, sister, you better believe, that kind of thing. Maybe that's what I was thinking.
And the thing that I want to bring up about it is that this casting of Lois and Lucy is during the time where you don't need to look anything alike in order to be family members.
Yeah.
Because there are, like both of these actresses, you can't be further away from looking like you're not family while still being just white.
Yeah.
And I'm don't know, maybe you watch some of the later seasons and have some memory here. Does everyone in Smallville know that Clark is adopted?
I don't know the answer to
Couldn't tell you.
I mean, because obviously they found him in a downed rocket ship and had to come up with some kind of cover story for why these really old people have a young baby. But also, hey, is it just me, or does Clark there kind of look like he's maybe a quarter to a half Japanese? Because of course Dean Cain has Japanese heritage, and that's one of those things like, boy, there were a lot of people whispering about what happened, what Ma Kent was up to when Paul was out of town that weekend.
We have to assume that he's adopted. But
meanwhile, like the local grocery store is owned by Pat Morita, so they just all assume that's who his real father is.
It is interesting of all the times where we have Superman, and obviously the question that's gone around since the inception of Superman is like, all he's doing is putting on a pair of glasses, and that's the difference. This is even worse because he's not just a random white guy. Like, you can maybe, bend credulity a little bit with that, just going like, a lot of white people can look sort of similar. He's got a Dean Cain, handsome guy who's just very distinctive look, that guy. And so you would know, like, even more so that we've always kidded about how, Lois is the last person to catch on that Clark is Superman. Not in this show, by the way, because eventually they figured out. And that episode I would like to see, where it's just like, what? Because she does eventually know that he's Superman, and you're like, how did it take you this long? He's so specific looking that you couldn't pull that off. That's ridiculous.
And she also saw him with his shirt off, in this pilot. So she knows he can't hide all those muscles under his dad's blazer, which is what it looks like he's wearing.
Yeah.
She knows what she knows what kind of heat Clark is packing. So when she sees the stretchy pants on him, she should know what's up.
Yeah.
I mean, to get back to the original thought about the glasses, I never believed that at all. Like from when I was a kid, I had a real hard time believing that people would be faked out by Superman Clark Kent, until I married a woman who, she takes her glasses off. You have no idea who that person is. She looks like two totally different human beings.
You ever have those friends that, like, they take off the glasses and all of a sudden their eyes get really small? Like, it happens in cartoons, but it happens a little bit in real life sometimes, where it takes it off and it's like, oh, all right, that's weird. You don't look nothing like yourself.
I've had friends that they take their glasses off and they can't recognize anybody, but I've never seen it work the other way around.
Who? What?
Hey, hold on.
Oh, my.
There, we can move on.
Need a slide whistle.
No kidding.
So one of the things that happens on this show also, I noticed, is that Clark Kent gets away. Clark Kent and Kat, both, they would be escorted out of the building now. There is no doubt about it. Kat, it's, you kind of give her a pass because she's so thirsty.
Yeah.
And that's like the character, and that's literally all that character is on this show, which I love. I love Kat. I think it's great that the wardrobe mistress on this show is like, what's the look we're gonna give her? How about space hooker?
It's also interesting with Tracy Scoggins, and I'm not talking about how she looks in real life, but her character of Cat Grant, the hair choices, the makeup choices, the wardrobe choices.
Oh,
it's so weird what shows like Dynasty, Falcon Crest, even the afternoon soap operas, what they thought hot looked like. Like it's weird. Like they definitely put a lot of effort into the look, but I don't know that it's any better than when you just like see a paparazzi photo and they're walking to the grocery store, you know?
I've seen so much crap in the last couple of days. It's all starting to blend together. But at one point, don't we see Terry Hatcher with like a lot less makeup, and she actually looks like really good. Yes. And you want to go, why don't this is what you should look like. You look actually way better than you do all done up, and Kat's even worse, to where there's just so much going on. You're like, who was like, oh, that does it for me.
There's nothing like going to your job, typing up articles at a newspaper, dressed in an evening gown with extra makeup and hairspray,
leopard print, and all kinds of crazy crap. But it's just like, it takes you an hour and a half to get ready every day.
Yeah, when she's in bed watching the soap opera, crying for some reason.
Yeah, it's a really sad episode.
Yeah.
So to get back to it here, right? So the expert scientists, they go to where he is, and he's in an abandoned warehouse.
Of course he is, because that was a cheap location to shoot at.
So let me. So I have a lot of questions here. So you have an expert scientist who's holding up in an abandoned warehouse. Why is he wearing a beat up leather visor? Why does he have a giant stuffed fish on his wall? Why are all of his notes in crumbled up pieces of paper instead of on a file on his hard drive on the computer that is sitting on his desk?
The regular set dresser called in sick that day.
I'm telling you, they walked into that prop department and they were just like, I want all of this. Just give it all to me.
They passed a flea market on the way to work and just picked up one of everything and used it.
My God. It's awful.
I get to take these props home and we're done.
I've always wanted one of those big mouth Billy Bass.
If it sings back to me, it's enjoyable.
And like the show, the thing about the show too, that was literally the scene where I was like, oh, okay. Because one of the things I haven't been able to figure out is that, that like the YouTube channels and the other podcasts who kind of do what I do, what we do, like no one is like, not a whole lot of people are reviewing Lois and Clark.
What?
And I couldn't figure it out because, it's like, it's 90s. It's like, there's a lot to talk about, but the kind of lot of talk about there is to do with this show is it's not in a fun way. Like you can't just sit and watch the show and have just a ton of fun watching it because it's the wrong kind of show for that.
Well, unless you are really going in for that odd kind of time travel thing to be like, oh my God, look at what the mid-90s were like. Wasn't it really strange? Look at all the stupid and crappy stuff that we did that passed off for quote unquote quality entertainment.
But I mean, it's not funny. Like the special effects on this show aren't great.
Yeah, most of them are bad. Sometimes there's like, oh, that's an all right shot. That's an okay thing.
Every so often something happens where you're like, oh, that's cool. Like there's that one scene where Clark flies out the window and then they catch it like it's like two different types of special effects happening where he jumps out the window and you see him just fly away.
The shoot off, that was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of hard to put your thumb on it, but it's a little bit of the situation where it's competently made enough that they were capable of giving you something you would have liked better, but it's not that thing that you would have liked better. And then again, you don't get the bad stuff to kind of laugh at. You don't give them a pass like I would Superboy with a much smaller budget and a much smaller stage that it was performing on. So yeah, it kind of falls into that. Plus the thing that they didn't. I don't know. They kind of didn't seem like they were embracing the comic book superhero side of it, but at the other side of that, it's like they're wanting to say they're not embracing it, but they absolutely are embracing it, but they're not having fun with it. It's a weird kind of like doublespeak. It's perfectly, to my sensibility, it's perfectly positioned to be appealing to no one, because the people that want you to downplay the comic book, well, they're not really doing that. But the people that want you to embrace it, well, it's also not John Wesley Shipp's Flash show either.
Right. And like they choose where the cool, like the good looking effects go. You know, like we just mentioned him jumping out the window and you see him just shoot away into the sky. That's really cool.
Yeah,
but
that
then
worked.
the worst special effect on the show, very weirdly, is Kansas.
Yes.
Kansas is the worst special effect on this entire show.
I think I would agree with that. I didn't
Man, it
realize,
looks
I didn't think
so
of it
bad.
in those terms. But there's some fun had in Kansas. I don't know how far we are on your notes from Martha Kent and her seamstress skills.
Oh my God.
I
man.
love that scene. I am a sucker for a stupid montage where we're
The
trying
dress-up
on
montage.
clothes. I love it so much.
I need a hero playing in the
oh,
background.
it's
Fantastic.
beautiful. So
Best
good.
scene
Yeah.
in the entire show, in my opinion.
And I'm not wrong in that on this primetime network show based on a comic book, Martha Kent was checking out her adopted son's package.
All the time.
And she's like, well, nobody will be looking at your face in that. And also there were some pretty sweet costumes in there. And I didn't realize how much the Supergirl show in season 1 kind of ripped this off in a way, you know, or paid homage to it. Dean Cain was actually in the show, so I wouldn't call it a ripoff, but they reproduced this a lot.
He's quite the slave driver to Ma Kent there. She made like 15
God,
outfits.
man. She's got like 40 different changes for him.
Yeah, I
I'd
mean,
be kind of like, hey, super fast alien, why don't you learn to sew? You can speak Mandarin, but you can't use a sewing machine. What am I?
he's like, I can't thread a bobbin. Can't do it.
And it would have kind of been funny if his first choice had been like one of those wild ones and it just didn't work out for him.
He tries it out a couple of times and it's testing bad. So you're like, let's go back to the lab on this one.
Because there were some material choices. Like, I'm not even talking about the way the costume looked, but like you take a look at a ream of leopard print cloth or paisley, you know, nah, we're not even going to take this to, we're not even going to alpha test this, much less beta. We're just going to move on.
Well, see, I like to think that she did that before he got home, and like she spent 45 minutes on it, so he's got to at least try it on to humor her. Just like, listen, this is
Like
not what we're going to do.
she thought she had it perfect in one. Like she thought he was going to try on that very first, very colorful animal print weird thing, and he was going to love it.
I think we're going to call you the cheetah because you're super fast. There you go. That works.
And they show him trying to lace up his Captain America boots. I mean, they had a little bit of fun with that. Probably the best like segment in the whole 2-hour episode, right?
Not for nothing though. Wouldn't you start with the crest and then go out from there?
Oh, the crest was an afterthought, man.
Yeah, oh, wait a minute. I know this thing that you've never seen before, and check it out. And what do you know? The colors kind of match up a little bit. I feel like you could have done that ahead of time and saved yourself a lot of sewing. And I also like how some of the masks and stuff that they did in the back of the suits, none of them like really meet up quite well.
Yeah,
It looks like they're just
totally
kind of half
Halloween
made.
store stuff.
Real,
You know?
yeah, real half quality things. I love it.
Yeah.
And like one of them looked to me kind of like an obvious Daredevil costume. There was some Captain America flair to the second to last before they got the almost winner. You know, so I think there was some intentional attempts to poke at Marvel with some of their goofy TV show stuff.
I wouldn't be shocked if some of those costumes came up later in the seasons as villain costumes or something.
They,
you know,
they will reuse a thing on the show for sure.
Yeah, there was, but it was kind of fun watching the costume montage. That absolutely the best part of the show.
So let's get to Lex Luthor's ball,
okay.
because it is so annoying to me that all we hear about is Lois doesn't have a +1 for Lex Luthor's ball. Like we hear it like 4 different times during the show in the lead up to Lex Luthor's ball. Then we get to the ball. There's Perry, there's Kat, there's Jimmy. Where are their +1s?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
mention.
Oh man, if you had to be Jimmy's +1, that's a sad state of affairs.
Well, it depends on which Jimmy you get.
That's a good point. Yeah, this
Plus-
Jimmy's way too good looking to not have a lady on his arm for sure.
Plus, like every television show or movie in the history of time always casts the person who can't get a +1 as the person who would have no trouble
Of course.
getting I mean, you just go down to the local bus stop and say, "Who wants to be my +1?" You're gonna have a
walk
line,
down the
doing interviews.
streets. This hot lady will go out with you. Like, oh, who is not signing up for that?
I'm glad that we're bringing this up because I have a separate thought, which is that I think I figured out that the reason why I was attracted for about 20 years to emotionally unavailable women is because of Lois Lane on the show.
Oh my
because
god.
of this specific Lois
Here's
Lane.
the thing. She's kind of a horrible person.
Oh, she's awful.
She's
just awful.
She's so bad. Like every characteristic that you don't want in a person, she's got it.
And the show doesn't give us a lot to like they don't really get too interested in developing female characters on this show. I'll just put it at least in this first 2-hour episode. I feel like I know way more about Perry White than I do about Cat Grant. You know what I mean? Like we got Lois, of course we know about her. I know nothing about her sister. Out of all the ladies on this show, I think the one that I found most interesting was that Dr. Baines, who I think would have been a good villain for this show if they didn't kill her off in the pilot.
I want to talk.
Yeah, agree.
I love this Prometheus space program. I love the idea that we are sending what it was journalists in the double digits to space. None of them have spacesuits on. None of them have helmets on. They are just sending them up in a rocket in a jumpsuit that you would use to change the oil on a car.
Only
there's so many.
There's
so many problems with security on the show, right? Because they got they're letting people with bombs onto the plane. Lois just kind of saunters in there. She goes off from the tour to her own little room. Like who are they turning away at fake NASA? And it's not just the security either, because the cops, there's that crime scene and the cops show up and they got the caution tape around, and Clark and Lois are just walking around in the middle of a hot crime scene.
And just straight up, just dressing down a police officer. And that police officer.
In front of everyone.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you piece of garbage. He was a real person and he had a name and a family and everything. You shut your mouth. And the cop just goes like, you know what, Mr. Reporter who's come in here and past the tape and everything, you make a good point. I suppose I'll just walk on. I was insensitive, and that was me. I was making a joke, but I shouldn't have. He was a real guy.
Oh man. And the space program stuff too. Not only are we sending 20 reporters into space on a cardboard spaceship, but there's so much demand. We got like a Coke Pepsi thing going on here. Like Lex Luthor is trying to get all the business away from this weird once in a lifetime shot up into space from the other program.
And you know who I think belongs on a spaceship more than anybody? 9-year-old girls in wheelchairs. I'm sure they just line them up. Just send them right on into space. What in the world was that?
Apparently there was a cure for paraplegia in space that wasn't on Earth. Yeah, I never quite followed the through line on that story, but the deal was if she got to space, she could walk again.
See, the idea itself was interesting, but the way that they kind of set it up is that unless we sent her there, they couldn't bring it back, because there's something about. Again, this is all probably pseudoscience mumbo jumbo nonsense, but they're like, oh, in space we can do the extra little thing that will make sure that we can, cure diseases and all this kind of stuff. I don't know why they had to send this girl. You couldn't. Can you only administer this? We'll call it a vaccine for lack of a better term in space, because that's pretty inefficient.
And also, this is something that pops up with narrative stories. But if you can do this for one little girl, why don't you put a few more little girls in wheelchairs on that ship?
That wheelchair takes up 2 spots.
But I mean, if this is such a miracle, why don't we get as many people in? We're supposed to feel bad for this little girl. Who's feeling bad for the thousands of other little girls in her town?
Nah,
they can't walk.
Forget them.
Is it like intolerable cruelty that you have this actress who clearly has some sort of physical problem?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, in our fake show, we're going to make you like a normal kid.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that.
I mean, that's pretty awful. And also, I hate to bring this up, but I know that you're casting for the right, hey, we've got a handicapped kid. Let's bring in a handicapped kid to play the handicapped kid.
Uh-huh.
Just awful line reads from that girl. Awful.
But
she studied with Dean Cain for a couple of weeks.
Probably. They probably went to the same school. Maybe Dean Cain was her teacher.
Yeah.
Dean Cain's
similar
my
line
acting coach.
deliveries.
But at the time, though, you also have to remember, in this early 90s here and everything, we don't have the kid stars. We are spoiled rotten with amazing kid stars today.
Yeah, it's true.
And so in the 90s, if you were a kid actor, you were still kind of crap.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Even if you were just like a performing kid, not even an acting kid, but like you could perform well, you would get your own show in the early 90s, late 80s.
Either that or if you were like 22 years old with a kidney condition, then you got to be a kid in a show.
God bless you, Gary Coleman.
So, we've talked about like some of the worst special effects on the show. We've talked about like Kansas is awful. Does anyone believe that there is such thing as a Congress of Nations?
and here's another weird thing that they like to do. This feels very Batman 66 when they bring out the Congress of Nations. But even Batman 66 admitted that the UN exists. Like, I don't think you get a copyright strike for saying this is the UN.
Yeah, like, is the UN going, we don't approve of this message, so no? Like,
it's not like saying I need to
your offensive stereotypes in if it's the UN.
That's true. Here's a guy in a funny hat.
Man, they had 4 people. Each person was a like your atypical walking stereotype. Ridiculous.
It was the 90s. What are you gonna do? Listen, go ahead. You have a little more?
Oh man, I got a lot more. Yeah, I got a lot more.
Okay.
So after, because I'm basically trying to just shoehorn in my last stuff here. So, first of all, really cool to see that Iranian actor from Iron Man in this show. He shows up. He has the snake. He throws the snake in Luther's room.
I'm glad you brought this
party.
one up.
Huh?
I'm glad you brought this one up because I got a lot of questions about that.
That's all I have is questions.
Yeah.
Because like I get that he's, like trying to show dominance on the Cobra and stuff, but why is he crying?
Exactly. First off, I don't know that exercise really works if you don't have an audience to impress. Like just proving to yourself that you're not afraid of the Cobra. I don't know that you really need to do that very often. And is the guy's deal like he gets paid per Cobra appearance? So he's trying to slip it in as often as possible to up his paycheck. Does he have a whole bunch of Cobras in case one accidentally gets killed? Like, I don't know what in universe Lex was trying to accomplish with that. Number 2, I have no idea as a watcher what the people who wrote, directed, performed that scene are trying to communicate with that. But I do know that, in the 80s, at least, some of the corporate folks were into some crazy corporate culture stuff.
Yeah. Like the art of war and all that jazz. And this Lex Luthor definitely feels like an art of war Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
Walking on hot coals so he can close that deal.
Yeah. Why the crying? I don't understand the crying at the end.
That's because he wants to prove he's a real actor, man. When else was he going to sneak those tears in? He's crying at the beauty of the Cobra, both deadly and beautiful at once, just like Lois.
He was in there.
So I'm sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Oh, real quick one. Just because it delighted me when I saw him on screen. He's only there for like a minute or two. He plays the guy who's doing the countdown. Clyde Kasetsu. He is one of those amazing character actors he literally has like 300 credits. If you've seen a television show, you've seen this guy, and he's been in a ton of movies and stuff too. He's one of those just character actors that when you see him on screen, I light up every time. It's like, oh, he's great.
Yeah, he's definitely a Jim Dandy for sure.
Go ahead.
So, as bad as the Superman suit is on this show, and it's really bad. I think what really sets off just how bad it is the belt. And the reason why I think that is that the belt isn't a practical thing.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't look real world. It looks like a child's Halloween costume belt.
Yeah.
And that is a problem when you went out of your way to show that the boots are real.
Yeah.
and then you pan up, and then you got this fake plastic belt for no reason.
I didn't like the boots being laced up. I thought that bothered me too. I understand it brings like a little bit more realism or whatever, but like, I don't know, they didn't look right.
The belt made me think of like the belt they put on marching band uniforms.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just there
Like
for
it's
flair.
there for purely for decoration, a bright color, cheap material, not built to last. But somebody's got to hold those underpants on the outside of your actual pants.
I always liked underpants that had the belt loops in them. Just get like looks. Just in case you want to do this on the outside, we put loops in there. Don't worry.
And I know that we're talking a whole lot about this because we have a lot to talk about with this show. I cannot state this enough. This was a very long hour and a half.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of action.
I was the one who texted suggesting we not watch more than this.
Well,
and I thank you for it.
Smart move.
Because it took forever to get through this hour and a half.
Now imagine it with 30 minutes of commercials, and that was
Oh
1993.
boy!
And between 8 and 10 on a Friday, this is what you were doing.
Throwing it in Maxwell House and Micro Machines commercials.
And this is my last note I have on it, which is that I did not laugh a single time on this show. Like, he's walking on the walls and doing the Lionel Richie dancing on the ceiling thing. Like, that didn't make me laugh. I didn't laugh until he lifted up the space shuttle by himself.
It looks like it's supposed to look kind of neat and kind of a big wow factor as the ship is going up with no smoke or fire or anything coming out of the bottom, and it looks like Poochie leaving the season. You know what I mean?
And shouldn't those guys at Mission Control have been a little more concerned? I mean, they showed that they were puzzled. Like, how is this ship that we did not launch taking off? Shouldn't they be losing their absolute living turds over this? This is bad.
It's worse than that, Bruce, because when this bomb is going off in the ship and everything, Lois rips off a panel and just starts cutting wires. She doesn't know what's going on here. Maybe that was the thing that brings you back to Earth alive.
That should take care of the oxygen here.
Exactly. It's so stupid.
Shouldn't the bomb that's going to take down the whole shuttle be a little bit bigger than those things you put under your tongue when your breath smells bad?
Yeah, but listen, it's a little corny and a little silly, but I kind of like that he ate the bomb and it just blew up and made it. But like, it's 90s cute, but it's okay. I liked it well enough.
I would have liked it if he ate the bomb, but it was more of a struggle to eat it. Like, I would like a Batman-sized bomb, and he's really working hard to chew through that thing.
It's just like, man, these super teeth come in handy because I gotta reach into this metal and.
And when it exploded in his stomach and then he burped a little bit, and I understand the budget.
Here we go.
And the special effects may have had limits, but shouldn't a little bit of smoke came out when he burped?
That would have been fun. Yeah, look, get him a drag off a cigarette or something and just have one of those. That costs nothing. I guarantee you one of the grips got a cigarette.
It's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's stupid, it's silly, but, I'll talk about it in the final kind of review here and everything. But before we do that, we do have to ask ourselves one very important question is, how does this pilot that's practically a movie relate one-to-one with Sylvester Stallone?
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement.
Mm-hmm.
If you're under the age of 30, I'm guessing that you have no idea who Dean Cain is, unless you're really into guest appearances on CW superhero shows or terrible direct-to-Redbox movies, and that's totally fine. I wish I didn't know who he is, because he's turned into the Kirk Cameron of Superman. But instead of becoming a dead-eyed religious nut job who seems to want to make the world a bit more Christian, he's a Trump-loving fake Christian who cashes in on his Superman past so he can star in cringe-inducing micro-budget movies like The Challenger Disaster and Andy the Talking Hedgehog.
Oh.
This shift in public persona has worked out for old Dean Cain because he currently has, wait for it, 13 upcoming projects, mostly Hallmark movies, because he needs to pay for that, what I assume to be Montana mortgage somehow, because no one's calling him up to the big leagues to play a superhero ever, which means that the world is still working. Dean Cain was born Dean Tanaka, but his mother would remarry director Christopher Cain when Dean was 3 years old, and that changed his last name to Kane. His adopted father is most notable for directing movies like Young Guns and The Next Karate Kid and the hilarious Joe Pesci, Danny Glover movie Gone Fishing. So funny. It goes Wild Hogs, Father's Day, Gone Fishing. Hilarious. Dean grew up privileged and rich, living in Malibu, went to Princeton, signed with the Buffalo Bills, and after an injury took him out of professional football, he went into acting. You know, the types of chances that everyone gets, not just rich, privileged kids. I'm guessing the next phase of his career is going to be playing the father/grandfather in movies and becoming the chairman of something with names like Americans for Religious Change or rich white people who have guns that are afraid of black people, or screw you, dirty poor people. I'm Dean Cain. I'm a horrible person. I don't know if you can tell because I hide it pretty well, but I really don't like Dean Cain.
I wouldn't have put that together.
In 2005, 2006, Dean Cain starred on the television show Las Vegas for 9 episodes, a show in which NBC dared to ask the question, what if someone made a TV show that isn't just for old people, but old people who still think riding a Harley is cool? And by God, they did it. One of those episodes also starred Sylvester Stallone, while we're speaking about old people riding a Harley. Formulaic and poorly written, Las Vegas was probably like a warm blanket to people who had reached the end of their life. And those people kept it on the air for 5 years until all of the people who liked the show eventually died. And NBC ended up canceling it. And Dean Cain would have to find someone else who would give him money for being handsome. So there you have it, sweet Kovaxers. This week's Stallone connection is the horrible, born into wealth, fake religious television personality Dean Cain. Adam and Bruce, this is the 324th episode of this bit, and still no word from Sylvester Stallone.
Hopes are high. All right, here at Hero Movie Podcast, we have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to reddit.com/r/Hero Movie Podcast and check it out, man. Bruce, where does the pilot for Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, fall on the Robin rating system for you?
It's not a good pilot, not a good show, not a good movie, but it's one of those things maybe I'd feel differently if I was somebody who liked it in real time. Like even the things about it that maybe were cool for a little while. Like, I don't know if Terry Hatcher's still cool. Like, I know she had some other show that people liked and stuff, but like, I don't know. I think you got to have some nostalgia to enjoy this, and where I just don't have any because I didn't watch it the first time around. It's not that enjoyable, but it does have just a few nuggets like the montage scene and burping after swallowing a bomb. I think it's worth watching this one time. You don't even have to finish it, but just check it out. So I'm going to give it like that really, really weak Damian Wayne. That's like, I want you to suffer with me. Go ahead and check it out if you've never seen it.
Yeah. And interesting though, because what do you guys think? Is Terry Hatcher, do you figure, is she nice, or is she, maybe she just plays a lot of mean characters and it just kind of comes off that way? I can't get her vibe in real life.
I think that there is the only way you can tell if an actor is well liked is their work. If they're always working, then they are a kind person generally. If they're not, then or they'll keep working, but they'll work on like Dean Cain's career is, where he's working on micro budgets and direct to Redbox and, you know, Hallmark movies. Like, if you have that career because you're sort of a known quality, but you don't get any more real acting work, then you are more than likely difficult to work with. And so because Terry Hatcher has been in she's been on 2 major television shows.
Yeah.
That's pretty rare to be working for at least 10 years in television and be a terrible person.
Yeah, turd day in and day out.
Do you guys trust Nicolette Sheridan? Like, when you think of Nicolette Sheridan, do you think that's somebody I can really trust? Because according to Nicolette Sheridan, Terry Hatcher is the meanest woman in the world.
Oh, well, she might be. And she might be.
And that's the thing. I like if somebody said that, I'd be like, I could see it. I mean, I don't know that she is, but like if someone said it, I'd be okay. I could see that happening.
If you're going public with stuff, if people are going public with stuff on you, then you are probably a terrible person. I mean, quite honestly.
Eva Longoria and Marcia Cross backed up Nicolette Sheridan on that. Apparently, the Desperate Housewives weren't so desperate that they wanted to keep the show going if they had to work with her.
There
Lordy.
you go.
Well,
there's your answer.
Interesting. Sean, throw it to you.
Let me put it to you like this. Do you like a Lex Luthor who wears an ascot after he's just had sex with some lady?
As you do.
Because that's the Lex Luthor you get on the Adventures of Lois and Clark. This show is awful. I mean, it's really bad. And it's worse than being bad. It's slow. It's a very, very slow moving show. So for me, like I tipped my hand earlier, it is a very, very low Damian Wayne.
Yeah. I'm same boat here. There is something about it though that is kind of fun to watch. That silly nostalgia of like, look at what we liked in the '90s. What were we on? It's a strange thing, and especially since I was in the younger category here, it's always fun to go back and see things that you watched as a kid and go like, okay, does this hold up? Did I think it was good, or is it just something that a dumb kid would watch and go like, I like this because it's colors. This isn't quite that bad, but it's not very good either. And I think you're right, Bruce. This is the pilot. I think would be worth watching, and I think you'll get an overall idea of what the show essentially was. For the most part, I'm sure some elements got better. I'm sure a ton of elements got a lot worse. But it's a very strange one to me. But yeah, I'm going Damian Wayne as this one as well. Who would have figured that your show creator, Deborah Jo Levine, that really sounds like somebody who knows a whole heck of a lot about Superman. But I don't know. It's a strange show. It's available on DC Universe right now. So, but not for much longer. My guess is it'll probably all go to HBO at some point.
Yeah, I've already gotten the email that DC Universe is going to comics only.
Okay, good. Well, I'll go ahead and cancel my subscription. Toot sweet.
Well, do we want to watch Superboy first before we all cancel?
Well, we might throw in one of those. Who knows? But that is it, everybody. Join us next week. We're going to be talking about some more stuff. Let me pull up our Patreon things that we've decided on that we're going to be voting. While we do that, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
Be on the lookout for Mandalorian 30 Questions with season 2 rapidly approaching at the end of October, only about 6 weeks away. You might want to go check out all of the first season episodes of Mandalorian 30 Questions if you haven't checked them out yet. And be all up to speed and ready when season 2 hits. Be one of the cool kids, one of the insiders.
It's so good. So good. Sean, what else?
Why don't you check out Snowpiercer 30 Questions, which is like something that we were like, hey, this Snowpiercer show, it's got a lot to talk about. And we do. And it's fun. It's a fun show to watch. And I had a great time doing our podcast based on that show.
Fastest turnaround we ever had for doing a show. I think it was literally like 30 hours before. Yeah. But by the time that we decided to do the show and that the show was up and available, like 30 hours, it was insane.
I downloaded the TNT app so we could do that show.
And do check out, my brain just took a half nap right there. Check out, what's the other show are we doing? Oh my God, The Boys. I kept thinking the Snowpiercer just because we literally just talked about it.
Boys for you.
The Boys, 30 Questions. That show is fantastic as well. If you like the first season, you're absolutely going to be in love with this second season. So check that out wherever you find finer podcasts. All right, so next week, here are the choices that if you are a supporter at patreon.com/HMP, you're going to be able to choose which one of these that we watch. It's a weighted system, so it makes it even more fun. We got a lot of feedback from our supporters and stuff saying they really enjoyed the weighted system. So here are the choices. We have G.I. Joe. Oh boy. The original Transformers animated movie, which apparently we haven't done. I thought we had, but I guess not. I think I covered that on the Film Find. I think that's where my problem was. We also have Man-Thing, The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. That's an animated film. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but it's very interesting. It's all in that Frank Miller style and whatnot. And the last choice here will be Old Boy, the original, not the remake. No one needs that one. So those are your choices. Go over to patreon.com/HMP and join up today. You get to vote on those. And, of course, all your dinger zones, pre-show, post-show, all that kind of good stuff. That is it, everybody. Join us next week for our Patreon supporter special for Sweet Sean's and Kovacs from the Internet. Bruce Leslie. My name's Adam Porteous. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.
Happy birthday, Marty.
Happy birthday, Marty.
Happy birthday.
Superman on Green Lantern.